Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Peace Podcast. This is Just Let Me Grieve the Childhood that I didn't have, whatever that looks like. And so there is this part of growing past and healing on that requires us to experience levels of grief. And it may sound kind of strange to think about grieving something that never existed. But when we have an expectation or when we have an understanding that something should have been a certain way and it wasn't, it creates a sadness in us that has to be grieved in order for us to move on. And what we tend to do is shy away from the grieving of the thing because of the shame that we feel around having the feeling in the first place. So if you're grieving this childhood where these needs were unmet, the truth of that situation is that you are saying that the people who were supposed to meet your needs didn't do what you feel they should have done in those circumstances. And there's a certain measure of guilt and shame that we feel that says, what is wrong with me that I would feel this way about somebody that gave birth to me, somebody that gave life to me, somebody that took care of me. But a title does not transfer into perfection. And sometimes I think that we do that to ourselves where we say, okay, well, this person did the best they could with what they had, and they are my mother, father, grandparent, aunt, whoever it is. And so because of that, I have to accept what they gave me and not have that expectation for anything more, even if what they gave me leaves me wounded. And there's a way to respect that person in your life while also feeling a void that they left. It's like if you had a parent who was a workaholic and they were providing for you financially, but they weren't there in their actual presence. It's okay to have wanted more of them and to say that you would have traded some of your monetary comfort for the physical and emotional comfort of having that parent there. And also still respect the fact that they worked as hard as they worked to provide you with the life that they thought that you should have. That can still create a wound, even if it's what others would deem a healthy childhood. So first we have to get past that part of us that feels bad, feels guilty, feels remorseful for having the feelings that we have in the first place. Because it's okay to have those feelings. Those feelings are what you're going to use as data. They might not be fact, but they will clue you into why you feel such a big void, such a big feeling of sadness, why you can't find the joy of what you experienced in childhood. And once you discover that why, it helps you to move past it. And that's not making excuses. It's not placing blame on people. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get to the root of why you feel the way you feel and how to get yourself past it. And the only way to do that is to allow yourself that feeling without any shame around it, without any guilt, without any what is wrong with me for feeling the way I feel, and then go through the actual process of grieving. Because healing requires us to meet the parts of us that have been hurt. It requires us to get down into those pieces so that we can tell those pieces the truth of our situation right now. So the first thing we have to do is acknowledge the loss. That's the real part. Give voice to what was missing. Say, I really wished that I would have had this. And that doesn't mean you're selfish, and it doesn't mean that your expectations are too high. It just means that you feel, feelings aren't facts, but you feel that if you would have had this thing in your childhood, that it would have made you a more well-rounded human. And I tell this story all the time about how I had a conversation with he's now 24, but then 22-year-old, about what he experienced in his childhood. And I was not upset with him when he said, I experienced some things in my childhood that created some of the anxiety that I have today. And I know that the facts of the situation are that I created that circumstance. By trying to ensure that he had what everybody else thought was a traditional family and give him what he needed in his household, I was not healed, picking the wrong men, and then putting those men in our household and giving him a horrible example of what to be like. And he developed hurt around that. That is the reality of his situation. I don't feel any type of, I don't feel any type of upset or offense because he feels that way toward his childhood. I was doing the best that I had with what I had, and it missed the mark, and that's okay. But he had to give voice to it. I had to know what he felt was missing, and he had to get real with what he felt was missing. So you have to acknowledge the loss. If you had a parent who was an addict, that is not a normal childhood. There is some loss there. There are times where that person won't show up. There are times where they're prioritizing their addiction over their family. There are times where they're showing up as this whole different version of them, especially when you painted them as a superhero when you were a little kid. If you have a parent who hasn't healed, who hasn't dealt with their own wounds, there are going to be times where they bleed over onto you, and that happened, and you can give voice to it. Maybe you're not in a space where you can share that concern with the parent, but you can allow yourself to see what was real, to acknowledge what you were void of, to get real with what you lost out on, and you can tell yourself that those were unmet needs. Maybe you didn't have the love that you thought you should have. Maybe you didn't have the safety that you thought you should have. Maybe they weren't as present as you thought that they should be. You can't change what they've done, but you can get real with how it felt to you, and you can get real with how those feelings in childhood have created the wounds that exist today. And the second thing that you have to do is allow yourself to mourn that. Grief is not this self-pity journey. It's not looking for excuses to be the way you are. It's not placing blame on other people, as I mentioned before. It is truth-telling. It is saying these are the facts of the situation, and that is the truth. That is what I experienced. And if you're able to talk to the other person, like my son was able to talk to me, then you get another perspective, which is this is what they experienced. But both of those truths created this situation. And that is the truth. That is the reality. And the only way to allow yourself to mourn that loss is to really get into the grief and say, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like I'm victimizing myself for feeling the feels, for saying that really was disappointing, for understanding that in that disappointment you felt a void, and that void created what your experience of love was like. And so you looked for that love a million times over in places where it showed up the same way, but you still felt the same void. And so it created a vicious cycle. It's okay to say that because someone in your childhood made comments about your body that you were ashamed of your body, and now you're dealing with the aftermath of a raging eating disorder. It happens. It is the reality, and it's okay to allow yourself to feel the hurt and the frustration that creates. And it's also okay to allow yourself to mourn, to say, that is really sad to me, that my experience was that. I really wished that I would have had this person, but now I'm understanding that I didn't, and it's okay for me to grieve and mourn that did not exist for me. It is okay to say, had it been this way a long time ago, I don't think that I would have turned this way in these areas where I'm wounded. But it's also okay to say, I know I can take control back of this. I don't have to remain this way. But in trying to understand, in trying to get down to the hurt, you have to also allow yourself to be real with yourself and to mourn that thing. Allow yourself to cry over it. Allow yourself to get frustrated over it. Allow yourself to scream at the top of your lungs over it. If you feel that feeling, you should hold space for it to exist, because what you experienced created the hole that you have in your heart, in your soul, in your emotional well-being. What you experienced created that. And so in an effort to fill that back up, which is the third part of this, you're going to have to get comfortable with mourning that loss, with wishing that things were different, but also knowing that they can't be, with having a hope that it could have changed, but also mourning that it's not going to, because perhaps the person that you experienced that from has passed away, or perhaps that person is still living, but they're unwilling to see the error of their ways. There's still a space for you to mourn that childhood that you hoped for did not exist. And then you have to create a new reality. You're an adult now. You are in control of your well-being. So you get to create your safety. You get to let go of those former expectations, and you get to step into your adult self and be in control of your healing. Once you're grieving that thing, then you can move forward in peace. You can say, no, it wasn't provided for me, but now I'm an adult and I've learned some really valuable tools, tricks, and lessons to be able to take care of myself in those spaces. No, I didn't get this thing, but I also know how to give that thing. And I know that when I have children, or because I have children, I can give them the thing that I felt like I was void of. And maybe I wouldn't have been able to had it not been void for me, had I not felt the pain of it not existing. But if you don't get to the part where you become the adult in your story, where you are no longer the wounded child in that story, but you are now the fully functioning adult who can handle and take care of herself, then you're going to remain in that victimized state. And that's why people always say, you know, this person is trying to be the victim, or this person is becoming the victim, or this person is victimizing themselves. And that person is never a healed version, because once you victimized yourself, you can't get past it until you realize that you are no longer the 7-year-old sitting in your room reading books by yourself to escape the reality of your household. You are now a grown-up who can read the books for enjoyment, but also truly be present in their experience and find joy in actually existing. And so because you are an adult in your story, you get to create a safe space. It's not dangerous anymore to share how I feel, because I've created a space that's curated for that to exist, whether with my children, with my spouse, with my friends. I can create safety by saying, I'm not going to experience a place where people are shaming my body. I'm going to allow myself to love my body for what it is and not listen to those old narratives where people were telling me that it wasn't good enough. It's okay to create safety around food. It's okay to get out of those eating disorder thoughts, because you are an adult in your story now, and you are the person who can create the safety for yourself. You're not relying on other people to do it for you. That may have been your childhood that you didn't have, but it's not the adulthood that you're currently existing in, because you're in control of it. So when I think about a time where I have processed, or I'm processing the loss of an idealized childhood, because that's what we do. We idealize what our childhood should have been. We watch movies and we see other people, and there are all these experiences that I can bring to you. Like, my dad was actively in addiction when I was 14 years old for decades, and I had this idea that he should show up the way that my friends' dads showed up. And he did show up for some things, so I don't want to paint the picture that he didn't, because he did the best he could with what he had. But also, like, my friends' dads were sending them flowers on Valentine's Day, and they were, just there for all the things. And my dad was just trying to get himself out of addiction so he could go to work and still take care of his family. And so I have to be able to say yes, that existed. And also, thank God for him being able to deal with his addiction and become somebody who is sober today. And he can give me the things that an adult dad can give to an adult daughter, even if that past didn't exist. And had he never gotten sober, I would have had to deal with the fact that he isn't showing up the way that I expected him to now, but that I don't necessarily need that, even though I need that. Like, I want it, but also I can parent myself through it. I had grandparents who chose favorites and on one side chose favorites, on the other side were just evil, and there was molestation and all these other things that were happening. And so what I saw inside of my childhood, once compared to another person's grandparent situation, I was floored at that being the way that grandparents were supposed to be, going to spend the weekend with your grandparents and them showing up to your games, etc. I didn't get that. But I also understand that I can be a different version of grandparent to my grandbabies one day. And that also, that made me a stronger version of me, because I am able to say, if these people who are in my space are not creating a safe space for me, then I can set boundaries around that the same way that I had to with my grandparents. So I learned a valuable lesson from that. You know, my mom was very wounded in her childhood, and so she brought those childhood wounds into her adulthood, and those childhood wounds became bigger as she got older and older, and I felt the aftermath of that. And I can grieve what I had hoped that our experience would be like, while at the same time accepting what it is today, even if it's not that version of what I had hoped that it would be. And so you can do those same things. You are the adult in your story. You have the power to make a new decision, to choose something different, and to choose to grieve that experience so that you can end up in a space of peace. And the way that you do that is write yourself a letter. Get it all out, because you have to get it out of here in order to process it and make something new of it. Get out your journal and write a letter that begins like this: Dear younger me, I am sorry that you didn't get this and that you had to experience this. And jot it all down. And then make a dedication to yourself to do something different. But as an adult, I will give you, and then list those things out too, in contradiction to the things that you didn't get when you were a kid. Because what happens when we dig down to the root of what's causing our wounds and we make that version of us safe again in our adult experience is that we don't walk around as hurt people, hurting people, but we walk around as healed people, identifying other people's hurts and also helping other people to heal. So you can grieve that childhood that you didn't have, but you can also create an adulthood that's everything that you wished for without existing with those wounds still gaping and oozing. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, like and subscribe to this channel. Go to all of my socials. I'm on TikTok now. Follow me there. And as always, knowledge gained and kept to yourself is selfish, but shared with the world could just be the catalyst for change that they need to break free from the bondage that they're experiencing. So share this message, save this message, share it later with somebody who might need to hear it. And remember that you are in control of your own experience now. So you get to change things that you are still hurting from and that are still ailing you. So go out and do that, because we have the power to make that happen. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time.